Trump's polling in the AP NORC poll dropped to 36%. 36% is below that floor range that I've been talking about, guys. So some of the folks that I've been talking to over the course of the past few months, the Waj Ali, Mike Nellis, Joe Walsh, who just both of those two guys just had a really fantastic Substack live. I wanted to jump on because I haven't seen these numbers drop this low before. Not in the AP. The averages will show this in just a little bit, but I do want to talk about what this means, and I do want to talk a little bit about Third Way's report, the centrist Democratic think tank, that's showing some of the softness with Latino numbers specifically, because we're starting to get the framework of what I think the overall environment is going to be like heading into the midterm elections. Now that February is kind of a real thing, we're seeing sort of the Trump approach with Pam Bondi doubling down on the not apologizing, not giving an inch, not giving a yard here. That approach is exactly the wrong political approach to get back to where they're going to need to get to make their situation somewhat competitive on the Senate side. If they think that somehow they're going to be able to bully their way out of the House side, I think that's just absolutely nuts. Will they do it? Probably. They probably will. And it's going to be very problematic. And we'll talk about that a little bit too, because again, there is only so much that they're going to be able to do. There's only so much that they're going to be able to do in a lot of these states where competitive House seats are at. Unless they declare martial law, and I don't want to go down that road yet, because that's not just about elections at that point. That's just a complete overthrow of the Constitution. And I'm not there yet. I understand that some people are. I don't know how valuable it is to be thinking that martial law is going to be coming in February of November cycle. I reserve the right to change my mind heading into summer, but right now that's just not where I'm at. I do want to talk about though this number, this 36% number. 6 in 10 independents in the country are now saying that Trump has, quote unquote, gone too far. And for those of you that have been following me for some time, I want to remind you all that back in February of last year, just as these discussions of mass deportations were starting to materialize, just as some of the hinting about Liberation Day was starting to come online, what I was saying was, the likelihood of overreach here is extraordinary. And remember that word, because it's overreach that is what's going to start driving numbers further south. Specifically, as the battle lines were being drawn in June or between, I should say, February and June, when the Republicans and the Democrats were positioning sort of on immigration and the immigration fight. The Democrats were reeling, as you'll probably recall, from this massive rightward historic shift amongst Latino voters. Even though they tried to center up with adopting the Langford bill in the Democratic Party's platform, even though they moved 180 degrees off of where Biden and Harris were early on, they still got walloped on the border issue. That debate, as I was trying to characterize, was saying that no one's going to win the immigration debate. There's got to be a loser. And the loser is going to be the person that over the party, rather, not necessarily the person. The group, the party that loses is the party that's going to overreach first. And you can absolutely guarantee yourselves that the Republicans will overreach on the immigration issue because they cannot help themselves. That's precisely what happened. And a lot of what is driving this stuff down, 6 in 10 independents are now saying, again, this isn't today's AP poll, okay? 6 in 10 independents are now saying Trump has gone too far in deporting immigrants living in the U.S. illegally. That's up from 46%. That's a 14-point move since last April, right when we were talking about it, right when I was first saying there's going to be whoever overplays their hand first, it's going to start driving their negatives through the ceiling. I keep saying down, depends on which way you're looking at. Approvals, disapprovals. The bottom line is a move from 46% of the American public saying that Trump overreached, now up to 60%, 14 points. That 14-point swing amongst independents is is what is driving most of the support level down below that 37% floor. 36% in AP, I don't know that I've ever seen that lower. Okay. I maybe depths of COVID, maybe when the economy was completely shut down in Trump's first term. This is absolutely the first time I've seen it in the second term. It's only been a little over a year, but I don't think we've seen the 36 percent number. Incidentally, his approvals on immigration are at 37%. These are really, really bad numbers. And anybody out there that is spinning or trying to suggest that somehow this is not part of MAGA defecting just doesn't understand basic math. Okay. And I'm not saying that there's a hemorrhaging yet, although I've been saying this for the past 3 or 4 months as the numbers have gone down from 39 to 38 to 37 to now 36. Is this incremental decline is largely, I think, measurable from Republican core base vote. I'm sorry if I'm looking off to the side. I'm trying to find some of the crosstabs right now, and I haven't seen them yet. If anybody else does have on this particular poll any of the tabs, and you want to throw them into the messaging board there to help me out, that would be fine. But let's also look at some of these other numbers. I'm sorry, I'm laughing because this is for somebody who reads polls for a living and runs campaigns for a living and looks at this stuff. This is a little bit breathtaking, guys. Okay. There will always be some of those peculiar outliers whose methodology I think is a little bit looser. This is AP. AP is the same polling outfit that, and we'll talk about Gallup. We should talk about Gallup in just a second, right? Because that's heartbreaking to see what Gallup just did in canceling the president's approval rating poll, mainly because they're concerned, and I'll say it, mainly because Gallup is concerned because they do a lot of polling for the federal government. And it clearly, the word got out is Gallup can't be putting out presidential approval ratings and expect to hold on to some of those federal contracts. Not a good look, Gallup. Not a good look. But again, is it any different than these major law firms or major corporations or tech bros that have all capitulated to Donald Trump at this time? It's kind of this pattern that we're seeing. At some point, you guys, the break of how pissed off Americans are is going to start having a backlash on all of these other institutions that have capitulated because he's not popular. Yes, he's powerful. There's no question about it. But the last guardrail for American democracy is the people, and the people are pissed. Like they're pissed. It's gonna drop an F-bomb there just to capture it. ICE, public disapproval of ICE, incidentally, is at 60%, a significant increase from 2018, which was Trump's first midterm, when 37% held an unfavorable view. I wanted to talk about this data point because this is crazy. This is nuts. I want to take you back to 2018, and you're going to hear me talking a lot about this in the coming months. If you don't follow me, join now if you're interested in this kind of discussion. I go over a lot of the polling. I'll go over a lot of the trend lines. I'm trying to give everybody a good sense of what we call the mood of the electorate heading into the November elections are, how emotionally driven, how intense those feelings are, because turnout is going to be a big factor. Somebody remind me to talk about turnout too, because I'll get off topic and forget about it. Turnout is going to be absolutely critical, and I want you to know what I'm looking at as we're looking at making prognostications about the midterms. But remember in 2018, okay, we had the highest turnout in midterm history, at least going back 150 years or to what we call the age of acrimony, which is the Reconstruction era, right after the Civil War, when we had about a 20-year episode of very high turnout elections marked by political violence, marked by ballot rigging, marked by governments trying to shut down ballot counting. not too unlike the scenarios of what we're hearing might be facing us both in this November and going forward for a while. We have been here before. If you do follow me, you know that I try to draw the historical analogies to give people at least some comfort that we have been through this kind of really ugly darkness before as a country. But 2018 gives us the highest turnout in midterm history. It's the highest Latino turnout history, but it's also the highest with every demographic and the highest anti-Republican break amongst Latinos in history. Okay. But, and here's the kicker, in 2018, guys, the economy was doing well. People had the numbers for Latinos and African Americans economically had really never been better. Things were going quite well. And the mood of the environment was still, the mood of the electorate was still decisively anti-Trump and anti-Republicans. This is that first year, for those of you that have been following along, that we started to talk about it as being a blue wave. 2018 was a blue wave, and the question was going to be, how big is it? And it was significant. There was like a 35, 40 seat pickup, right? This is, and now we've redistricted in 2020 since then. So a lot of prognosticators are saying, well, you can't have that big of a pickup because there's just too many safe seats. Oh yeah, well, SD9 in Texas, that Senate special district in Texas, was supposed to be a safe seat too. It was a Trump plus 13 seat. It ends up going double digits for the Democrats. Low turnout, everybody says. Well, that explains it. Well, let me explain it a different way. Democrats are the beneficiaries of low turnout elections. That's a new development. That's the last 3-4 election cycles. But if the Republicans aren't getting significant shares of younger, male, non-white voters, they're in deep trouble. That's squarely the Latino demographic that was their prized trophy after the 2024 elections. You follow? What happened with that voter after Trump is sworn in? That historic rightward shift where 54% of Latino young men vote for Trump, that's that same pendulum swinging back with tremendous ferocity that voted in historic numbers in Passaic County, New Jersey, in Manassas County, Virginia, in their 2 gubernatorial elections, in Imperial County, California, in Prop 50, in the city of Miami, in their mayoral election a couple of months ago. Same group in the Texas Senate District 9, the special election last Saturday night. Cubans, Dominican Republicans, Venezuelans, Mexican Americans, for the first time, are shifting in a cohesive bloc. And so I'm going to say something. You heard this here first. For 30 years, you've been hearing people talking about the Latino vote saying, well, the Latino vote's not a monolithic voting bloc. Well, friends, at this moment in time, it's absolutely a monolithic voting bloc. I've never seen Cubans voting in the same direction as Latinos in Tarrant County, Texas, as they are in Imperial County, California, as they are in Passaic County, New Jersey, as they are in Manassas County, Virginia. I have never seen that. You know why I've never seen that? Because it's never happened before. So all of this qualifier that these talking heads and prognosticators have always said about the Latino vote not being monolithic, in 2026, they sure as hell are looking monolithic. They have since 2025, at least in the way that they're voting. And that's telling us something. So remember, in that 2018 year that I'm talking about, that is decisively anti-Republican, decisively anti-Trump, highest midterm turnout in history. In history, ICE has a 37% unfavorable view. In 2018, 37% unfavorable. Now, remember, there were ICE raids and there were crackdowns in Los Angeles County. They were happening throughout the country. Nowhere near to the extent of this, not militarized, Not a lot of masked stuff, none of the jackboot thugs, certainly not shooting U.S. citizens in the face, but there were ICE raids, there were crackdowns. This, of course, is that same year where Fox News was bleeding and blaring about caravans coming. Remember, this was the caravans year. That was the bulwark they were trying to use to stop the bleeding that they were seeing in the polling, saying we're in deep, deep trouble here as Republicans. Let's scare white suburban women back to the Republican camp by saying all these brown guys are going to come and rape them and give their kids drugs and do what, Latinos do, according to MAGA rule. Long way of saying 37% was the negatives. Guys, listen to this. Listen to this. It's sitting at 60% disapproval right now for ICE. From 37 to 60. That is just breathtaking in scope on the negatives. And there's only so much predicting that you can credibly do in February of a November election, okay? So many things are going to happen, guys. We're not even going to remember a whole lot of it. So much is going to happen. But what I am going to say is this. The economy is going to be in bad shape. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. Okay? There's a reason why the government isn't putting out this economic data right now. If it's the same reason that they've cut Gallup off at the knees and said, we don't want you putting this data out anymore. And if it was historically bad for Trump in 2018 when the economy was doing good, what do you think is going to happen now that ICE is 100 times worse and the economy is bad and getting worse? This is what explains why we're seeing these polling misses in the off cycle. In 2025, nobody was looking at the New Jersey governor's race and saying this is going to be a 15 to 17 point blowout on the Democrat side. Nobody was saying that. They were saying probably give Mikey Sherrill 2 to 4 point win. Maybe. Nobody was saying Spanberger's going to win by double digits here. Nobody was saying that there's going to be a majority pickup in the House of Delegates in Virginia. Nobody was saying that. Nobody in California was saying that Prop 50 was going to win by 25, 27 points. Even in California, nobody was saying that. Okay? The Miami race for mayor, nobody was saying this is going to be a double-digit victory for the white progressive woman over the Latino Republican male candidate. Nobody was saying any of that. And the reason why, and look, I'm not dumping on pollsters. I'm literally working with pollsters, if not every day, every week. I'm actually working on a Latino poll right now that will be fielded later this early next week. And I'll share it here on a live too, because I think there's going to be some really fascinating data coming out. But my point is, in the same way that if you don't weight correctly for intensity, you can miss the Republican turnout for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020 and 2024. All of those are credible, legitimate, I would argue, scientific reasons on why that can happen. You have to use the past as an indicator of what the future is going to look like. You can't just guess for no other reason. You have to look back at recent trend lines, at demographic shifts, and at changing coalitions in order to weight, WEIGHT, your demographic groups to develop a voter turnout model that is most likely to look like what happens on election day. That's the art of polling, okay? There's an art and a science to it. There absolutely is. We rely on as much science as we possibly can, but at a certain point, it's just a guess. You can make the scientific guess as close as you possibly can to what reality is, and that's what we fight over and talk about and look at. But in the final analysis, it's just a guess. And that's what happened in 2025 and in 2026. They were just guesses. But they're, I'm not going to judge them. I would have been guessing the same way. As much as you can look at the intensity, to be able to quantify that is, one, it's impossible. You can make a guess, but it's impossible. But nobody's polling is picking up this tremendous chasm between how energetic and how pissed off and how angered Democrats are that are literally counting the days on the prison cell with a line of chalk until election day, and Republicans who are at best going, oh my God, this guy's a dumpster fire. He's in the Epstein files everywhere. He's pissed off Canada, for God's sake. The dollar is dying before our very eyes. The whole world hates us. You've got people, he's putting out racist memes where Tim Scott finally has to say something. He's losing Republican votes in the Senate, turning on him. The House conference turned against him on the Epstein files after Marjorie Taylor Greene, of all people, abandoned the party. Like, you can't tell me that things aren't shifting. We can debate how much all day and all night about how much the impact is. But if you want to say it's not shifting, you're not paying attention. It is. It is. Is it going to change Trump's behavior? I don't think it is, but is it going to change the response? I absolutely do think it's going to change the response. It already is changing the response. Okay? We wouldn't be facing a government shutdown unless there were 8 Republican holdouts that were saying something about this. Because remember, there were 8 Republican votes that forced this position. So you don't tell me it doesn't matter or they don't care or this, it's already happening. It's already changed. Okay. Now, can it change back? Sure. Sure. Can there be a foreign, external push? Sure. Could there be some rally in the economy? Highly unlikely. Massey, look how Massey's becoming a martyr, even with people on the right, by taking Donald Trump on and saying this is straight outright corruption. The point I'm trying to make is this. When you are seeing AP's polling showing the headline is Trump approval crashes to 36 in AP survey, getting clobbered on deportation crackdown. The overreach that we were talking about a year ago has happened. It's manifesting. And it's not just driving approval ratings down with everybody, it's driving approval ratings down overwhelmingly with independents, and it is quantifiably, measurably having an impact on base Republican vote. You are starting to see a lot of these kind of right-wingers or bots or social media influencers or Russian assets putting out on social media, Trump is still at 85% support amongst Republicans. I don't know how to break this to them, but for those of you that have been following me since the Lincoln Project and I started doing these talks with everybody, I started to explain to people that the Bannon line, where Steve Bannon agreed with me when we were, fighting back and forth through social media and the press, the Bannon line where I was saying 4 to 6% loss, a 4 to 6% shift in the Republican base means Trump loses the 2020 election. And what happened? He loses 6%. And just as I predicted, he lost the election in 2020. Guys, that number is down to 15. He's losing 15%. So, yeah, it is a peculiar anomaly. Whatever the hell the Republican Kool-Aid is that they're drinking, where still 85% of Republicans support this. I get that. But if you got to look at this from a campaign professional's perspective, that is a terrible number. It sounds really high because as a moral, ethical human person, it's concerning for sure. But as a campaign professional, that's a dismal number. That's a horrible number. 85% tells me 2 things. Even if 100% of those 85% of Republicans showed up, it's going to be a GOP bloodbath. They're going to lose the House by considerable numbers, and it probably puts the Senate at 50-50, a coin toss, essentially at this point. Watch Ohio. I think credible political consultant has said Ohio is really competitive for 8 years. I think Ohio's races are going to be competitive this year. Okay? There may be an outlier in places like Kansas. So Alaska is undeniably competitive. We'll talk about Maine as we get closer because I hate Maine. I invested so many millions of dollars in Maine trying to pick off Susan Collins last time in the 2020 cycle. Didn't go our way. But the mood of the environment, the mood of the electorate is decisively different. Even in 2020, we were seeing a narrowing on the generic ballot that we're not seeing. We're seeing Democrats 3 or 4 points up on the generic ballot and pulling away. And remember, the old adage, the old idea that Republicans are the beneficiaries of low turnout elections is no longer true. And even when they are high turnout elections, which I expect this will be a very high turnout election. Incidentally, if it's a low turnout election, that's even better for the Democrats. But if it's a high turnout election, it means that you're seeing movement and shifting with younger, browner, more male voters. This takes me to the point I wanted to talk about on the third way polling. Third Way came out with some research today. This is the centrist demographic group. My data guy, Lucas Holtz, who worked with me on the Lincoln Project and is just nails. I think he's a great, great data guy. Wrote some stuff. I'm going to be writing up something and posting on it probably tomorrow here on Substack and on YouTube. If you're not following me on YouTube, doing a lot more of these essay discussions and explanatories on YouTube. So follow me there. Be sure to follow me at Mike Madrid channel. Their research, guys, this is a warning, if not for this election cycle, then going forward. But I want you to breathe this in a little bit. Okay, I want you to think about this a little bit because we're only seeing a 4-point shift amongst Latino men under 30 right now, leaving the Republican Party. Four. Not huge. It's enough because this is the base vote. This part of the electorate is what convinced Republicans was going to build their new racial realignment party, the new Trump MAGA coalition, the new racial realignment that was they believed their own bullshit so much that they gerrymandered 3 of these 5 Texas congressional districts based off of winning the Hispanic vote. And most of you, except for those that are really new here, know that what I was saying back then was this is a dummy mander. This is the dumbest, most ill-advised, arrogant, hubris-filled move I have seen a political party take probably ever in my professional career. To stake your whole majority on one election cycle. Now, I've been advocating, I've been writing that this has been happening for 10 years, this rightward shift that's been happening with Latinos. But the real kicker was to get to those majorities, you needed the numbers that they were hitting in 2024. To believe that that was somehow a permanent realignment is just beyond me. And I get it. There's some smart Republican pollsters that were writing books. Patrick Ruffini wrote this in Party of the People. The numbers are all solid. I'm actually a fan of Patrick Ruffini as a professional. I look at his work. It's all very solid. I think his conclusions were totally wrong. But what I do believe is that his numbers are 100% correct, which was showing this abandonment of the Democratic Party by people of color, by younger people of color, de-aligning, not realigning, de-aligning, moving away from both parties at the same time and voting for a lesser of two evils at any given moment. I don't want to get back into that claptrap about it. I will be talking about it more because I think as we get closer and closer to this election cycle, I'm being vindicated yet again. The right was telling me that I was wrong back 8 years ago. The left was telling me that I was wrong when I was warning about the rightward shift. The right is going to start telling me that I was wrong again, and I'm sure the left will keep saying, Mike, you're wrong too. As long as the right and the left are both telling me I'm wrong, I know that I'm right. I'm more and more confident in what I'm saying because everything that I've been articulating, and I'm not saying I've got some crazy insight. This is just simply looking at data, very basic data. Like a 6th grader could see what's going on here and come to the same conclusions that I'm coming to. I think I just have the political courage to say it, and I'm not looking at it through a Republican or Democratic lens. That's what's different. That's what you're going to hear from me. If you're not getting a little bit uncomfortable and a little bit angry about what Mike Madrid is saying, you're not listening close enough, because the reason people follow me is because I am going to challenge the basic orthodoxy that most people on social media have. That's what data does. I'm not here to just prognosticate and use 4-letter words. Sometimes they slip in, or use as many adjectives I can about how bad the other side is and blah, 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 blah. You can get that anywhere. What I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the actual polling data, both publicly available and then my own private data when my clients will allow me to release it, to start showing you where the lanes are for victory, what the weighting looks like for an environment like this, and what we call the fundamentals are as we start to really get a grasp on what's going to be determining who shows up in an election cycle and how they're likely to vote. And it's why I wanted to jump onto this call right away is I've never seen AP at 36%. You're already starting to see polling saying Donald Trump is a worse president than Joe Biden when it comes to the economy. Okay? Um, he already is suffering from a lot of the same elements that branded the last 20 months or so of the Biden campaign, which was he's feeble, he's old, he's doddering, he's probably not capable of it. And if it's either slurred speech or shuffling gaits or a lack of prioritization, this guy's not up to the job. He's not up to the job. And when you couple that with both the incompetence they're seeing by this tariff policy, which overwhelmingly and broadly people hate, and with the overreach that we're talking about, this backlash against the militarization of our streets, it starts to develop a perfect storm that is likely to have a significant impact on the outcomes of the November elections. It's certainly going to start setting into more concrete attitudes with voter opinions amongst the swingiest part of the electorate. So really quickly, back to, and again, Latinos at this point in time are really, really the most significant, in my estimation, swing vote in America at this point in time. Yes, younger white male voters under 30 are also swinging. It's also why you're seeing data on young people moving decidedly in the opposite direction. It's the same dynamic that is affecting young people and young Latino males. By the way, there's so much overlap in those concentric circles that this shouldn't be shocking. They're less racially polarized. They grew up in a much more multiracial, multi-ethnic, multicultural world than those of us of a certain age over 30. But they're also much less partisan. And they believe that that partisanship of their parents or people over 30 is part of the problem. And they're right, incidentally. You can't tell me they're wrong. Is if you're so dug in on one side that you can't see the other side without hating the other side, they don't see the world that way, which is why they're moving as much as they are. And I'm not suggesting, incidentally, certainly with Latinos, I haven't looked at a lot of broader youth vote data, but with Latinos, they're not becoming more conservative. And in 2025, 2026, they're definitely not becoming more democratic. They're becoming more anti-democrat as they were in 2024, and now anti-Republican in 2025, 2026. That's a profoundly different way to look at these numbers than anybody has looked at before. So, because we've always looked at them through a partisanized or racialized lens, that's not what Latinos are doing, especially young Latinos under 30. Frankly, it's not what young voters broadly are doing. And that's what's created this pushback against whichever party is in power. Voters are de-aligning, they're not realigning. And for those of you that are interested in politics, I think you probably are because you wouldn't be watching this show otherwise. Challenge yourself to look at the world and look at our politics through that lens, and a lot of things start to make sense. A lot of people a growing number of people, particularly young people and younger people of color, are starting to push back on the old way of looking at politics as either red or blue, or this is the way black voters vote and white voters vote. They're not buying into those models anymore. They see the entire system as problematic. They don't see a whole lot of difference between the failures of Democrats and on policy positions and the outreach and the overreach and authoritarianism from Republicans. They see them both as bad, and when at any moment they're sitting at, they're going to reject those partisans, those parties that are in power. That in large part explains, incidentally, the split in the Democratic Party right now. It's not as much ideological as it is who has power and who doesn't, who's on the inside and who isn't, who's got privilege and who does not have privilege, as the youths would say. That's the way they're looking at the world. It's not right or left, Dem or Reap, big government versus small government. Guys, we haven't had that conversation in a real meaningful way in American politics in a decade. That's what the era of populism is about. And these populist tendencies manifest when you're against both parties. When you lose faith in both parties and are equally open to the fact that they could both be screwing up when each one is holding power, that begins to explain why our politics is operating the way that it is right now. All of this, of course, is not good news for the incumbent party. Like, it's bad news. Okay. And as I mentioned, even in 2018, when the economy was good, it was bad news for the incumbent party. Remember, in 2018, Republicans had the House, the Senate, and the White House. That's not going to be the case in November, barring the election shenanigans, which again is a separate talk for all of that stuff. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to say. The concern on the third way report, and I will post it when this video goes up, and I'm going to write on this tonight. I didn't cover it much on this right now, but I hadn't seen the AP poll until just a couple of hours ago. I've been spending most of the morning writing on the third way report because they are doing some good stuff with Latinos, men of color, how they're behaving or not behaving. Only a 4-point movement away from Trump towards the Democrats in this environment. ICE raids, ICE crackdowns, affordability. That's how challenged the Democratic brand is for these young men of color. And you can blame them if that makes you feel better, if that's your coping mechanism, or you can start listening, because there is the one thing that is open to the Democratic Party, and this may be the last chance, that it is an opening to get it figured out. And if you figure it out as a Democratic Party, I think you can start to put Trumpism away, hopefully not in its entirety, but contain it and not allow it to be as toxic and dangerous to our body politic. But it's going to take some real self-awareness. It's going to take some internal party fights. And what these voters are asking for overwhelmingly is what third way is characterizing as productivity. They don't feel that the economy is allowing them to provide for their families, that the Democratic Party is far more concerned and interested on cultural issues than they are on actually not only promoting and advocating for working class men of color, but in their policies, even when they do understand these voters, they're not providing any meaningful results. And I've got to say, it's hard to disagree with them. Okay. And if you don't like that, again, you can stand there and be as righteous as you want while you're losing and stand in the midst of this and blame them for racism or misogyny or whatever else you want to blame them for. Or you can actually listen to the science and the data and start being a little bit more self-reflective and saying, maybe there is something to what they're saying. The choice is yours. I'm not, my job isn't, to convince you. I'm not here to convince anybody. My job here is to kind of look at the data, provide you what a campaign perspective would be as it kind of looks at this really extraordinary moment in time. And what I will also say is, I'm not convinced that Trump can't keep going lower. Like, when we hit 39, I was like, this is bad. 39% approval, incidentally, guys. That's enough to lose the House. 42 is enough to lose the House. 39 all but guarantees it. Then we started seeing 38 happen. And then there was a couple kissing 37. Now we're seeing 36. When you start to see a 35 hit, and that's probably why Trump said no more Gallup. No more Gallup. Don't let them do an approval rating poll. Threaten them with losing all of their other federal contracts, all of their other federal work, all their other political public opinion research. Because guys, Gallup gets millions and millions of dollars to test things for the FDA, for the State Department, for the Agriculture Department. They're constantly trying to gauge public opinion. All of these federal contracts are separate and removed from the poll that they've been doing since the early 40s, which is presidential approval. And it is heartbreaking for somebody like me that looks at the baseline of support. When I say stuff like the highest turnout rates or the lowest public opinion rate, numbers, consumer confidence since 1951, that baseline gives us a historical reference. So he is destroying our ability to compare apples to oranges and look at our moment in time compared to other epochs in American history. So as somebody who looks at polling, who uses polling, who tries to use it not only as a political tool or a guidance tool for elected officials or various interest groups trying to influence government, it's also a historical barometer. So I'm sure I'm not gonna break anybody's hearts or bring anybody to tears for losing a poll, but Gallup has been there from the early days of public opinion polling, and this is a big moment when the federal government, when Donald Trump says, I don't want my polling numbers out there because they know they're not good. And in fact, Gallup probably shared that their numbers were historically low, which is why when I see AP at 36, we may see other polls coming out below 36. And so now I'm going to leave it on this note. We are appropriately and rightfully talking a lot about a rising authoritarian moment. This is a very dark moment in American history. But most authoritarian regimes, guys, only take root when they're very popular in the minds of the public. If Donald Trump was at 70% approval, 65% approval rating, I would be far, far more concerned. When he's at historic lows and getting lower, that's a really important point. That's a really important thing to show that he's not, that the American people are waking up. And so thank you for joining me. I'm going to wrap it up right there. If you do have any other questions before the video is put up, you can go ahead and message them. I'll get them and I'll try to address them in the write-up that I do on this. But we'll talk soon, and I'm sure we'll be doing this a lot more regularly.